JT Crowley is Talking Books. On the show, you'll hear from emerging talent and seasoned veterans from around the world.
Hello, I'm JT Crowley, and I'm delighted to have on my show today Holly Brough from the state of Utah in the United States of America. She's joining me to talk about her book, The Name I Chose. 43 chapters of highly imaginative storytelling told through creative, well-written prose. The story revolves around the main character, Amalia, and is set in 19th century Spain. As I said in my written introduction that accompanies this podcast interview, if I was a literary award scheme, this book would be rated Gold Star Plus in the category New Author Must Read. Must read, everybody. Holly is married with 3 children. Has she always written and read profusely? No. In fact, she really didn't engage with reading until the birth of her first child, and only started writing a couple of years ago. This is Holly's first book. Let's hope, everyone, there are more books to follow. For more information as to who Holly Brough is, have a look at the written introduction that is linked to this interview on Talking Books on Web Talk Radio's site and the usual podcasting platforms. Plus, go and have a look at her webpage, www.hollybrough-tnic.com. So let's get Holly on to join me so that she can talk to us about this book that she has written, The Name I Chose, and less of my waffle. Holly, come and join me.
Hello, John. It's a delight to see you today. You look very handsome.
Don't worry, everybody. She's off to the opticians tomorrow.
You're a tease.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, Holly, before we open the book, would you care to tell the audience who you are and why you've written this book?
My name is Holly Brough, and you introduced me. You told me who told them who I am. I'm a mom, and that has been my main focus in my life, is taking care of my children. So before that, I was an entertainer, and I developed rheumatoid arthritis, and so my focus had to change. I became a mom, and I raised 3 children, and by the time they were teenagers, I was able to venture out and develop some new talents, and one of those was watercolor painting, and the other was writing a book, and that was quite a challenge, but a wonderful adventure. It's been a joy to be a part of this experience.
And I'm just praying, everybody, that Holly is going to be writing lots more books, and she gives me the wonderful opportunity to interview her again.
I would be delighted.
I'm sure you would. Now, Holly,
you asked, sorry, John, you asked why I wrote the book.
Yeah, why?
I wrote the book. I wrote the book because I'm a very imaginative person, and I had a scene play out in my head that was both intriguing and disturbing, and I couldn't get it out of my head. And so I felt like I needed to explore it a little bit more. I went home and looked on the computer to study family history, places, peoples, cultures, time periods, and I'm obsessed with British history. So I thought that this experience, this thing would take me to Great Britain, but it had its own mind and started in Spain, a place I'd never been before. And so that was a lot of studying and research, and after going through those motions for a while, I decided that the story needed to start 2 generations back to help explain how this person in this vision, if you will, became who they are.
So she thought about setting the scene in Great Britain, but she's transferred across to Spain, everyone.
We
Now,
do see Great Britain.
oh, yes, absolutely. The United Kingdom, through and through. Especially when I come from there. Now, Holly,
Exactly. Yes.
the prologue is quite an intense opening scene. We've got Manuel Turo, Lucita, and Anton all in a confined area. Lucita is chained, possibly to a wall, I imagine. Anton, her fiancé, the father of her unborn child, is dangling from the ceiling. And Manuel Turo, whose unrequited love for Lucita has been well and truly rejected, leaving him a rejected suitor, you could say. And you could probably just say he's a deceptive manipulator. So, Holly, why did you choose to set the prologue out in this fashion? For it really does set this triangle of characters out in a strong and determined way.
Well, like I said, I felt like the story needed to start 2 generations back, and that starts with Lucita. I also needed to introduce the villain of the story, who is Manuel Turo. He is a real person. I based his personality on his father's personality, Manuel Godoy. He was a very influential person. They called him the Prince of Peace in Spain, but he did everything and anything he could to go up the nobility chain, seduced the queen. He did all kinds of things. He killed people along the way. He was a really terrible man in history. And I based his son, Manuel Turo, on him. There isn't a ton of history on Manuel Turo about his personality and who he is. So that's why I needed to introduce him and kind of set the stage for the rest of the story.
Interesting, isn't it, everyone? Now, I notice, Holly, that you head up most, if not all of your chapters with a flower illustration. And I can only assume with your artistic flair, you're the artist behind these drawings. But that's by the by, everybody. Because we're not here to talk about the illustrations, the drawings, we're here to talk about the book. And now this book, as I said, is amazing. It's very creatively written, and there are 43 chapters to it. Now, we're not going to go into all 43 chapters because that's not the whole idea of this podcast interview. The idea of the podcast interview is to give you a flavor of what this book is about. So Holly and I have agreed to talk about certain chapters, which will give you a hint and a flavor of what the contents of this book is about. So, Holly, let's go to chapters 4 and 5. Now, in chapter 4, we meet the characters Amalia and Sonia. They're being shown around the Tudors' palatial property by the housekeeper, who informs them of their duties and how to conduct themselves when the master and his family are in residence. And then in chapter 5, we start to see the preparations for another dinner party Manuel Turo is throwing. And we also start to see the unwanted attention Manuel Turo is directing at Amalia, which she is very much aware of and tries to avoid. So, Holly, I'd be fascinated if you could tell the audience what is going on in these 2 chapters. Where are you taking the reader at the start of the book here?
That's a great question. Let me just start by saying that as Amalia and Sonia are taken through the estate and shown where they would be working and told what their responsibilities would be, there is a point where Senora Morales tells them when the nursemaid is not here, there are several servants on holiday, so your duties will be a little bit more extensive. And Amalia, who was sold into servitude to Senor Trudeau, at that point says, well, I'm supposed to be the nursemaid. Why, if they already have a nursemaid and they have all these other servants, do they need me? And Senora Morales said, that's a very good question. So Amalia immediately realizes she's not needed in this home. She's wanted. And then when we go into this dinner party, we see how intimidating Manuel is, how he is targeting Amalia, and he talks about her to his guests, calls her the most beautiful servant in all of Hispania, and says derogatory things that make her incredibly uncomfortable. And she realizes that she's not a servant, she's a target.
It's fascinating because she's very young, isn't she?
She is. She was sold into servitude at the age of 15.
And you know, when I look at the book, Holly, I do like the relationship between Amalia and Sonia. They seem to get on really, really well together. Did you do that purposefully?
Absolutely. Amalia didn't ever have friends, and Sonia is an only child. So putting them together, they're complete opposites when it comes to personalities. But opposites attract, and they become very close friends, even sister-like, if you would say, become sisters, not by blood, but by choice. And it becomes a very beautiful and tender relationship, something that they both need, something that they both commit to, and they create an alliance that is extremely helpful and important to both of them.
It's a very strong bond, and we see it quite often in the book, everybody. And I just thought I would like to mention it. So I'm going to take you now, everybody, to a little bit more into the book. And we're going to head off to chapters 10 and 11, everyone. Now, I personally found this part of the book really engrossing. And so let's, as I says, let's venture there. Let's see what these storylines are about. Chapter 10, we see a romance opening up between Amalia and Cisco, a duke of some nobility. He is. Is this a societal mismatch? Maybe, maybe not. But that's all within the book. And then in chapter 11, things get a little heated between Cisco and Amalia, and really don't go according to plan. So, Holly, where are you taking the reader with the scenes here? And are these chapters significant within the context of the overriding story for the whole book?
Well, first of all, Amalia is the mother of Alejandro, who is the main character of, or the main inspiration for this whole series of books. There will be 3. The next one will be mainly focused on Alejandro and his life experience and what happens to him. So we had to be introduced to the Duke of Cadiz, who is Francis de Assis. He is a real character, a real person who was bound for the throne to marry Queen Isabella II. In history, we know that she preferred his younger brother, but because he was the oldest, he was the one that should have taken the throne, and so his family forced him to agree to that. And also, history describes their relationship, his and Isabella's, as strained. They didn't like each other. They weren't attracted to each other. They spent most of their married life apart. They had 9 children, but it is believed that none of those children were fathered by Francis or Cisco. Some rumor that he was gay, a homosexual, and he preferred the company of men. In my story, I illustrate Cisco as a noble who does not want the crown, does not want this life, would rather live his own life, be an adventurer, and maybe even a culinary artist, someone who had the freedom to choose their own destiny. And he puts on a facade for people that he is frou-frou, and he kind of makes a mockery of what his societal position should be. And but when he meets Amalia, his personality comes out as romantic and kind of a naive teenager who just wants to have a simple life. So their relationship, it develops, and Amalia falls in love with him, and he thinks he's fallen in love with her, and they wish for a different life. But then in chapter 11, they have a confrontation. Cisco receives a letter from someone, I believe it's his uncle, Carlos, and he's told that he needs to go back to court, that he needs to woo the queen. And he's in the middle of this love affair with Amalia. Anyway, he loses his temper, he gets angry, he becomes somewhat crazed, and he tries to force Amalia to be intimate with him. And she gets scared, and she runs away from him and tries to defend herself, and in that process wounds him in a way that changes his whole life. It makes it impossible for him to father children. And that's my explanation as to why he never fathered any of his children. But that nobody knows for sure, except that Queen Isabella was very promiscuous. So, in real life.
Yeah, I think you could say that's what life was like back in those days. You married who you were told to marry. And certainly in royal nobility, you didn't marry for love. You married for status.
Right.
And it didn't always work out.
No.
No. Now, Holly, you wanted to touch upon chapter 17, for you felt this was an important chapter to the whole story as it introduces Joshua and Gilbert Channing to Amalia. Now, these 2 characters have a major impact on the second half of the book, everyone. So, Holly, would you care to state your case here as to why you introduced the characters here? But more importantly, why at this stage of the book? Why are you introducing Joshua and Channing here in chapter 17 and not, say, in chapter 7 or 8?
I was trying to illustrate the difficulties that Amalia was going through in her life. And up to that point, she had seen little grace. In introducing Joshua and Gilbert Channing, we see a potential savior. And that, I think, is extremely important. When I was writing the book, and it was really based on names, I had chosen Joshua Hastings as a name And when I was going through the definitions of names, I found that Joshua is Hebrew for Jesus. And if you look at Joshua's personality, he has a savior complex. He cannot see anyone in need and not do something to help them out. So when he meets Amalia and he recognizes in her face something familiar, he is drawn to her. Not only as a man would be drawn to a woman, but he's intrigued by her and he wants to know her story. He is aware of who Manuel Trudeau is. And if you look at who Joshua is and who Manuel Trudeau is, they are complete opposites. And I think it's important that we have comic relief in the book as well. And that is what Gilbert Channing offers. He's a wonderful companion to Joshua. You see their relationship is very congenial. They love each other. They enjoy being together. They are a great companionship. So Joshua, a potential savior, Gilbert Channing, the comic relief, and that kind of introduces how possibly Amalia can get out of the situation that she keeps getting herself into.
She does, because she's in a very tight situation. And the book is, she's 15 when she starts off this book, everybody, and there is a past to her. And if you want to know what's that past, well, you're going to have to read the book, everybody. But I now want to delve into the book a little bit further. So we're going into almost, halfway through the book, everybody. We're going to go to chapters 18 and 19, this part of the book. Now, Holly, before we get a sneak preview as to the plots involved here, I get a sense that, as I said, we're halfway through the book, that these two chapters are important in their own right, as they strengthen the overall storyline and give the reader a sense of a direction of what's coming down the line. Am I right?
Yes. We see a turn in Amalia's life. Her trajectory has gone a different direction. Unfortunately, in these chapters, we see Amalia enter another prison situation where she has little choice, little freedom. But if you consider her circumstance, she's single, pregnant, and homeless. So her situation, it's pretty destitute. And so she takes the opportunity she's given, and it ends up being another prison that she has to try and escape from. And so we've had Joshua introduced, which is really important. And then we see the development of another difficult situation for Amalia. And even though Amalia is extremely resilient and she comes out with ways to overcome situations, she is so smart and ingenuitive. And there are a lot of things that she can do to better her situation, even in a situation where she feels in prison. And we see some of that come out in her in these next chapters.
Yeah, because we're at these scenes, this part of the book, we're actually, it's the tavern scene. And she's not actually in Spain anymore. She's in Menorca. And so she's, when I looked at this part of the book, these chapters, I've personally felt that she was entrapped again. And you've said it. She's back in prison again, but different. It's a different type of prison. It's a different type of scenario here. And I think you have brilliantly spun this together. Where did the tavern scene come from?
I don't know. A lot of these things have played out in my head, and I see them and I can see the characters. I can feel what they're feeling, and I can just kind of see where it goes and what's supposed to happen. And it's like a movie playing out in my head. The tavern, I really don't know why it ended up being in a tavern and in the worst place of town. Those kind of things just kind of, they evolved and became that. So, and the name of the tavern is interesting because it's not a comfortable place, but that's what the name means.
And it certainly wasn't a comfortable place to give birth to.
Oh, no. Horrible.
Horrible.
And her midwife was someone she absolutely hated. The thing that is interesting about these parts too is that we've seen the patriarchal order of society play out, and we've seen how it has suppressed Amalia all the way down the line. And it's interesting how we see the matriarchal order of society buy in to this patriarchal order of society because they want a voice and they want to have power, a say. And so they kind of join hands with these men who are suppressive and manipulative and unkind, and they buy into that because they think that it'll give them some power too. And you see through these experiences that it isn't real. Women just did not have power back then. They didn't have a way to become who they wanted to become without external help. And there wasn't a lot of help out there. So they had to, find ways to be strong where they stood. And I think that's important to know nowadays. And that women can be strong where they stand. They don't need to stand in someone else's shoes to make a difference.
Again, I suppose it's different societies. This book was set in the early 19th century, and of course we're in the 21st century. And women's roles were very, very different then as they are now. And this is what you see in the book, everybody. It's absolutely fascinating. I just found it riveting. That's why I said I'm going to give this book a gold star plus. If I was a literary award system scheme. Now, when you look at the book, everybody, the book is, as I said, is set in Spain. But the next part we're going to talk about in chapter 25, for some reason, Holly has flipped from Spain and decided, I originally thought the idea of setting this in the United Kingdom, Great Britain, so I thought I'd better go there. And she has. So in chapter 25, we're at Hodcote House, the home of Lord and Lady Huntingdon. Very English name, that is. Who are the parents of Joshua. And we have the characters Gilbert Channing, Joshua, Amalia, cousin Ulia, and in chapter 26, we hop back to Spain, everybody, but not quite to mainland Spain. We go to Menorca. And that's where Amalia gives birth to her son, Alessandro, in the tavern. So, Holly, would you care to tell the audience why the British connection here? Why, Lord and Lady Huntingdon? Why the character Joshua again? And where are you taking us? Are you starting to build this up? Yes, we're probably about 2/3 of the book here. Where are you taking the reader here?
Okay, so Joshua is related to Abuela, who is cousin Eulalia, his mother's cousin. So he has a direct connection with Lucita. And that's how we find that out. We also realize that Joshua is the oldest son of the Hastings, and he's a Viscount, and he's responsible for taking over the earldom and taking care of the family. However, because of his insatiable need to help others, his parents allowed him to join the Navy. And he served at the tail end of the war, and he was carting things back and forth between England and Spain during the peacetime. That's how he met Amalia. So that's where we find he's taking Abuela home to safety in England, where she belongs, and he also takes Sonia. We find out that he's helping and aiding Sonia. And so he takes them home to take care of them. We find out that his responsibility really is to marry and become the Earl of Huntingdon. And he doesn't want that, but he realizes his responsibilities. However, he has fallen in love with a Spaniard. The interesting thing is his mother is a Spaniard. And she and cousin Eulalia, I apologize, are Spaniards. And intermarrying is looked down upon. And it was very difficult for his mother to find a way into English society, even though she was the daughter of a hidalgo, a branch of nobility in Spain. Mixing the two ethnicities, cultures was looked down upon. And Josh was kind of following into that in that same direction. So there's some they discourage him, but they realize that when his heart sets on something, there's little to discourage him from following that.
You like your nobility, don't you?
I do.
It does.
I do. I think that there's some disconnect between the nobility and the other classes. And in Joshua's situation, he doesn't like that. He doesn't think he's any better than anyone else. And I think it's at this time, Queen Victoria is reigning. Albert is fantastic. He gets out more into the community. I think the idea of bringing classes more together, working together, is a concept that is starting to bud, kind of starting to become a little bit more important to people. And Joshua is a part of that revolution, per se.
He is. But I'm not going to say any more, everybody. You want to know? Simple answer, read the book. But let's head off to chapters 34 and 35. Now, you've put the storylines into, for what I think is, we've gone into full automatic mode here as you race towards the end without getting towards the end here. We've got Amalia, we've got Joshua, we've got Channing, all featuring heavily here. Remnants of Cisco, Sonia, and even Manuel Tudor. He comes back on the scene. Lucita, she's back, who had to endure the torture of her lover Anton at the hands of Tudor, has given birth to a girl. What plans does Tudor have for that girl? It's interesting when you read the book, everybody. What will happen if Tudor finds out about Amalia's son, Alessandro? A horse riding event. Holly, these are busy chapters. And, it's combining what I think is the past, the present, and the future here in this part of the book. And I think everything is vying here for the reader's attention. I think you've very cleverly done this. So, without giving the end game away here, where are you taking the reader here?
Well, up until this point, we've been seeing this story play out, and we've been trying to figure out who Amalia is, how is her connection. How is she connected to Manuel Trudeau? Why is Joshua a part of her life? So all of these things are coming together. We're finally starting to get some answers as to who Amalia truly is and what her possible life could be if she's willing to take a leap of faith, per se. One of the things that I think is really important to note is, and some readers are frustrated with the fact that Joshua doesn't just jump right in and save Amalia from her situation. Why doesn't he do that?
Yeah, why doesn't he do that?
Because he doesn't want to force Amalia to do one more thing. She's been forced to do things her whole life by other people. And he wanted her to make her own decision. So he wasn't going to force her to do anything. And there's kind of a parallel there, because if you consider, Joshua shows how good of a person he is. He shows her that he cares and he wants to help her and he wants to be there for her. He loves her for who she is, no matter what she's done. And he invites her to come to him. He invites her to choose him. The same thing is with our Savior, Jesus Christ. He is not going to force us to choose him. He will not force us to come to him. He shows us his goodness. He shows us that he loves us, and he invites us to choose him. And that's kind of what Joshua's whole thing here is, that he wants Amalia to choose. And it's frustrating because she doesn't just say, all right, you know, there's an inner struggle there for her. She feels like she's not even worthy. And how many times do we feel that way?
Very often.
You know, we don't feel worthy.
Mm.
We don't feel good enough. So we can't take that offer.
So now you've given us an insight, a brief glimpse into what this book is about. Now, you've already hinted at there's going to be 3 books in this series.
Right. The second book kind of follows Amalia and Joshua's future. And we think that maybe Manuel Trudeau is out of the picture. We don't know. We want to hear more about Cisco. Does he ever seek Amalia out? We'll find out. But we follow Alejandro's life. You know, we see the beginning of his life, and it's pretty terrible. So we continue that journey through Alejandro's life. He becomes Alexander. And then the inspiration for this whole thing, the first book, the second book, the third book, doesn't happen till the end of the second book. And that's an introduction into the third book, which actually ends up being the happy ending. But we have to get through a lot of really hard things to get to the happy ending. And that's life, isn't it?
It is life.
Life isn't roses all the time.
No.
It can be harsh.
And I think, to capture the reader, an author has got to keep them in suspense as long as possible, keep the drudgery there, keep the tension there, before they open the door to the light coming through. And I think you do that very, very, very well. And I'm just hope that the next book comes out this year or maybe next year. She might even say, "Can you interview me again, John?" Who knows?
That would be wonderful. And I hope it comes out in the next year or so. That's my goal.
I'm fascinated here as to who do you see as your market? Who do you want to see reading your books? Mature people, young people, men, boys, girls, who?
I think my primary audience is women, and women who have been through a lot of life experience will kind of understand a little bit more of what Amalia's process is. She's very immature at the beginning, and she, through life experience, becomes more mature and more responsible and more of who she's meant to be. So I think that my primary audience would be women who've had a little bit of life experience. However, I've had teenagers read the book and really enjoy it. And I've had men read the book and really enjoy it. There's enough adventure, intrigue, deception, murder, good relationships, romance that I think it would please pretty much anyone who is interested in historical fiction to enjoy it. My father, who doesn't read historical fiction, he's more into biographies and autobiographies. He enjoyed it. He really enjoyed it. And he was frustrated that it ended 2 or 3 chapters too soon. He wanted answers and he didn't get them. So
He has to wait for the next books to come out. You know, I
does.
think men will enjoy these books as well because they will see, well, what type of men existed back in the early 19th century.
Absolutely.
So,
And I haven't had any bad ratings or reviews from men, so that's good.
Holly, where can people get your books from?
It's on xlibris.com, who is my publisher. It's xlibris.com. And you can get it actually anywhere books are sold. You can get it on Amazon. However, I don't get very much of a royalty from Amazon. So if you want to help me out, go to xlibris.com instead. And it's in hardbound, paperback, audio, and ebook. So it's on all of the different medias.
And if they go to your webpage, can they get the book from there?
They can order from there. Absolutely order from there. That will take them to xlibris.com, and they can order from there, and they can get a little bit more background and a little bit more about me on there as well.
There you go, everyone. I have to say, Holly Brough, it's been a huge pleasure interviewing you.
Thank you.
Reviewing your book, looking at it, and getting to find out who these characters are. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And as I said, if I was a literary award scheme, I would be giving it a gold, a +1.
Thank you so much.
Category of new author must read. Holly Brough from the state of Utah in the United States of America. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
I'm JT Crowley. Thanks for watching wherever you're in the world. Stay safe until next time.